Hello, I'm Fox Fairy, and I do art while I break down politics and discourse. All from a marginalized viewpoint, of course. Hey guys, so in my last video I mentioned I was duosex, and I'd like to address that here. It's something I've known for a long time, and there's a lot that goes into it, but I think it's important that I talk about it and make these terms less unknown and allow people to understand somewhat what it feels like. So, for context, I am assigned male at birth, and I am male to duosex, which could be MTD or MTDX, or you could just say MTNB if that makes you feel any better. And I experience a very similar type of dysphoria as binary people do. In fact, I don't feel as if my experience is vastly different from theirs. Let's explain that. So, what does it mean to be duosex? Duosex is a type of dysphoria where someone is dysphoric because their body does not display a mix of both male and female sex characteristics. So, a transsexual person who is binary would experience dysphoria over both their primary and secondary sex characteristics, all of their sex characteristics. Someone who is non-binary would experience gender dysphoria for only some of them if they're duosex, and for every combination, all of them if they are null sex. There are multiple ways to slice duosex, and yes, it's a very vast umbrella, but we can normally slice it into 3 groups, but it's all duosex and doesn't generally matter. But the basic understanding is there is high contrast, low contrast, and medium contrast duosex individuals. A high contrast duosex person would experience dysphoria in a sense that they need their male and female traits to be more extreme. They might be dysphoric for facial hair and obvious boobs, and they might experience dysphoria for either one of the primary sex characteristics of males or females, or an in-between primary sex characteristic bottom dysphoria. Some duosex people experience medium contrast, where they would want to be like in the middle, like not super obviously like both gender, but not exactly an even mix, if that makes sense. Low contrast duosex individuals experience dysphoria that is more muted. It's like between the extreme duosex and null sex on the spectrum. They want their duosex characteristics to be more fluid, like they might want light hair on their body and smaller chest or more cohesive looks, or they might want a primary sex characteristics set that is indicative of both sexes but not entirely, whereas a high contrast duosex person may want sex characteristics that are very male and very female. A low contrast duosex person may want sex characteristics that are more cohesively male and female, like something that falls in between those spectra but isn't as functional as a high contrast duosex person would feel dysphoric for. You can think of it as a sliding scale between male and female and both and nothing, like a triangle, the gender spectrum, as I put it, where on the left you have female, and on the right you have male, and at the bottom you have null sex. Duosex people are anything that's in the center of that spectrum, and then null sex is the very bottom point, female is the very left point, and male is the very right point. You can also switch the sides that male and female are on, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so there are a lot of traits that go into duosex dysphoria. For me, I am medium to high contrast duosex, which means I want clear and significant sex characteristics. So basically, though I want no facial hair at all, I still want to be visibly in between sexes without someone having to look at, well, my bottom dysphoric area. I am mostly dysphoric for my lack of breast development, my fat distribution, which is somewhat feminine, but not completely, and my facial construction. I have an issue with these things, but other than that, it's not as large, although I am dysphoric for my primary sex characteristics. It's more in the functional sense than the visible sense. I can vibe with the fact that my primary sex characteristics are male, although I have drawn out extensively what I would like them to look like. I will not be showing those drawings because that's personal. The most comfortable set of primary sex characteristic constructions that I would feel most comfortable with is not medically possible. So I'm just going to have to deal with that dysphoria until possibly more discoveries are made, but until then, it is sadly not possible for me to alleviate that type of dysphoria. So I just have to settle for alleviating most of it. So what does my duosex transition look like? Well, the first step is HRT. I start HRT in March, on the 13th. I'm going to my local Planned Parenthood, and they are getting me all ready for that, and it does not feel exciting, it feels necessary. It feels as if finally I'm going to be fixing this problem that I've identified since I was very young. A lot of people say that gender euphoria is a big thing, but for me it really isn't. I don't exactly feel euphoria except for the first few moments of dysphoria alleviation, until eventually that euphoric thing is just, it gets less and less strong until I don't really experience it anymore. It's just sort of passively better than before. I would also be getting electrolysis for my face and possibly my body, but my body hair is less of an issue than my facial hair. When I look in the mirror and see my facial hair, it ruins everything. I can't exist with it. It haunts me. It's like little bits of mail stabbing into my face and eating it from the inside out. And even when I shave, it leaves a 5 o'clock shadow, even seconds after I finish shaving. I can never get rid of it completely. So I will have to get electrolysis for my face to get rid of it. Some say that laser is an option, and I haven't tried it, but most sources that I look at say that laser isn't always permanent, or is only sometimes permanent. So I'd rather stick with what I absolutely know is going to be permanent. I will be doing voice training too. I'm in a position now where I don't have the time to voice train nor the resources to figure out how. I've made some strides in the journey, but I keep losing my progress the moment I make it. My voice definitely is a very large part of my dysphoria, but it's not as large as the issue with my hair, my breast development, or my fat distribution. It's more of a, when I'm in public, I'd rather sound more androgynous, and female voices are inherently more androgynous. And when I'm in public and I speak looking more female and sounding more male, I am subject to possibly getting hurt or attacked, and it's more of a defense mechanism than a means to alleviate dysphoria. The dysphoria does exist, but it's much smaller than everything else I have. I would also possibly be getting facial feminization surgery, which is where they would boost the feminine aspects of my face and decrease the masculine aspects of it. Facial construction is more of a tertiary sex characteristic. It doesn't necessarily exist as a result of your puberty or your birth. It develops slowly over time throughout your entire life. And there are females who can have very masculine face structures and males that can have very feminine face structures. I happen to be a male that has a more masculine face structure, and makeup doesn't always cut it. So I might need facial feminization surgery if that becomes a larger part of my dysphoria. I'll have to take several steps throughout my HRT process to preserve function in my male primary sex characteristics. From what I've seen, male sex characteristics on HRT are a use it or lose it sort of thing, and there can be a lot of pain and issues relating to it. However, some people report the use of some materials to help lessen or reduce these symptoms in the male primary sex characteristics. For me, transition isn't a means to achieve a goal. To be less dysphoric is the goal. Dysphoria is the issue. I don't have dysphoria because I identify as duosex. I identify as duosex because I have the dysphoria. You don't identify as something that you don't fall under the definition of. That's simply how it goes. I can't stop this at any time. A lot of people say to non-binary people that to you, you can just stop. To you, you can just dip out, but we can't. It's not like all of this dysphoria goes away the moment that we want to blend into society. Hell no. It gets worse. Whenever I have to pretend to be male, it genuinely hurts me. But then again, when I have to genuinely pretend to be female, that doesn't feel completely right either. I know who I am, and I can't stop doing that in the same way that you do as a binary trans person. That's just how it is. I would like to be able to just stop, and I would love that. In fact, I sat on the bedroom floor crying and praying to God that this wouldn't be true, but as we all know, it doesn't work like that, and it happened to be true, and this is what I am. So how did I come to find that out? After a lot of introspection, I just took a while to analyze my childhood up to now. When I was really, really young, like a small child, I had no issue with my body. But once everyone around me started hitting puberty, I started to notice things that were different about me and the girls and boys around me. As I started hitting puberty myself and my body hair started growing, I started to feel gross, like it was wrong. I didn't really care that much about other people seeing my body hair. My issue was that I could see it, that I could feel it, and it was bad, it was horrible. It pestered me, it pecked at me like woodpeckers on my flesh, like scarabs within my skin. It ate and it crawled, and it was the worst. But eventually I learned how to repress it, and I just repressed it for very long. And at the stage where the girls around me started getting their period and developing breasts and getting taller, I started feeling strange, like I was supposed to be going through these changes. Within my brain's perception of my body, these things should be happening to me soon, and they didn't. My body sort of took this as being a late bloomer instead of just not being the correct sex for that, and I just repressed that too. Eventually, we all got older, and throughout high school our sex characteristics became much, much more defined, but I was more focused on having a boyfriend than my own personal health. I pushed aside everything just to find a boy who would like me, and that meant pushing away all of my negative thoughts until I had a boyfriend, getting negative thoughts, that relationship ending, and then collapsing. After I got out of that mess, I had more time to think about myself. And as I was doing such, I started to realize that my relationship with my body wasn't proper. That when I looked down, I didn't see what was supposed to be there. Something was wrong. Oftentimes I'd try to tie it to things around me. Oh, I'm just upset because this or that, but most of the time there would be an issue and I'd just have to deal with it. Once a month I would have a breakdown over something that a female could do that I can't, and it's just horrible, you know? There were days where I had thought that my body did something female and it didn't, and it caused extreme panic attacks followed by a breakdown once a month almost, and I would feel horrible about it. and I would feel so alone and wrong, and it was the worst thing that could have possibly happened to me. Now, with all of this being said, when I picture the effects of HRT, most things are good. In fact, most things are great. But the effects on my primary sex characteristics give me a similar feeling to how I feel about my body hair in relation to that. So if there is a way that I personally can preserve function, I wouldn't have that feeling for my primary sex characteristics that much. Obviously, I have them because they're not what they should be, but what they should be isn't medically possible, like I said. But they're survivable. They're livable. But what does it really, feel like to be duosex? A lot of people have descriptions for what it feels like to be male or female outside of the dysphoria. For me, it's like I don't tie most existences or most thoughts or feelings to words. I tie them to physical sensations in my brain. I ascribe every piece of myself a passive feeling. My left hand feels more left and my right hand feels more right. My right hand feels heavy and dense and my left hand feels stretched out and porous. Everything has an ascribed feeling in my brain. In my head, maleness and femaleness do have their own ascribed feelings. Femaleness being more light, more large, more deep, whereas maleness is round and gamey and booming, but it's also muted, if that makes any sense. My passive feeling is the midpoint, the mixture between these two sensations. That's not a part of my dysphoria, that's just a more, spiritual analysis based on my neurodivergence. But I figured it was an important point to make since a lot of people who are duosex experience their own existence in very different ways, and that's how I experience mine. So, conclusion, I am duosex. Those are some ways that I detail experiencing being duosex. I am not a man or a woman, and I'm definitely not neither. I have a gender. I'm not genderless. I am duosex. I am between. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can check out the pinned comment below this video to see my Discord or my Instagram or my Tumblr, and you can even find a link to a subreddit called r/nonradtransmed, where you can connect with the community of transmedicalists who aren't radicals. Alright then, I'll see you later. Love you.